Hello, welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Flowers for Madame, released in 1935. It's the 118th in the series and it's directed by Friz Freleng. A restoration is out there, and at the time of this recording, it has not been released on any physical media set. Hopefully that'll change, and if it does, I will update the description below. It is under copyright, can't show the full thing here on YouTube, otherwise the video will just get blocked. But in case you haven't seen it, we see your usual beginnings, as is typical with these early merry melodies, where you just got things coming to life and dancing, and as you've no doubt figured out based on the title, we've got flowers dancing in the beginning, so after a few scenes of that, we see that there's going to be a flower pageant, and prizes are going to be given away. So after we see a few entries, we see that a cactus, or is it cacti, whichever one, decides to enter, but is not given the time of day. We then see our third act villain, the dastardly Flame, out to try and ruin everything, but our cactus ends up wanting to save the day. So pretty straightforward, and this is your typical merry melody short of the period of time, where they'll show off a few gag scenes with the concept of whatever's coming to life. You'd have some sort of a story in the second act, and then we get our villain in the third. So is this one any good or not? Well, we'll find out. We'll definitely go through it. But a few bits of trivia for this one, and the big one is that this is the first 3-strip Technicolor cartoon released by Warner Brothers. So brief history, and I know I would have mentioned this in some other reviews, so apologies to those who already know this, but Walt Disney had the exclusive rights to the 3-strip Technicolor process, and he used it on the Silly Symphony short Flowers and Trees, and he had the exclusive rights to do that, while the other studios had the inferior 2-strip process, which meant that the shorts all had that greenish tinge to it because the 2-strip process uses green and red, versus the 3-strip, which breaks down the green even further into blue and yellow. So now the colors are going to look a bit more natural and closer to whatever the artists have intended. And say what you want about this short, it's perhaps not the greatest in the world. I mean, you probably figure that when you saw the title of this review is Flowers for Madame, but you can't deny that it looks gorgeous, and now that it's been restored, it looks even better. Now, also being Merry Melody short, it's also promoting a song. So, as is on all these Merry Melody shorts, my good friend Manny, the tuning tenor, he's going to come on board and he's going to discuss all of the musical references within. Although, unlike Billboard Frolics, I don't expect it to be too long, because Billboard Frolics had the first appearance of Merrily We'll Roll Along, and this one has Flowers for Madame, so there's that, I guess. But what we're going to do is take a look at this short from start to finish, and I'm going to go through some extra references within. And this one, again, is nothing too deep, but hey, at least it's got some wonderful visual eye candy, so let's take a look. And I should point out as well that sadly the original titles are presumed to be lost, and because this is the first 3-strip Technicolor short, there is a bit of a debate as to whether it actually has the original Jester ending that's been on the previous Merry Melody shorts recently, or if there are colored rings, or whatever the case may be. So hopefully one day the original titles will be found, and original ending cues will be found so we can see what was originally done. And right away we open up with a beautiful garden, and again, looks absolutely gorgeous. But we go in and we see that, as you'd expect, some flowers start coming to life, and we see a few dances in time to the actual song. Now, I'm sure Manny will elaborate here, but I love the scene where we see the first flowers, which are like bells, and they're going perfectly in time to the music. And Friz Freleng was definitely noted for his timing, and it's definitely on full display here. But after that, we see some beautiful dandelions doing what looks to be a ballet routine, and again, looks nice, can't really complain. It's timed so well, and definitely looks like a proper ballet routine. So I wonder if the animator of that scene actually went out and saw ballet, or maybe saw some footage or something to reference against it, because it looks really good. It looks just like proper ballet routine. And in the midst of all that, we see, in time to the music, of course, some roses opening up, and we see 2 bees making out. I wonder if some massive nerd is going to say, well, actually, there is a queen bee, so why would there be a couple bee in there and really overthink things? Definitely not me. I never overthink these things. So after that extended bit of dancing, which, again, looks nice, it does take a little while, but hey, at least it's very technically proficient. We move on to this other dandelion who looks rather familiar, especially if you're familiar with comedians of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, and that is Harpo Marx, and he's one of the Marx brothers. And it's not the first time Harpo Marx has been parodied in one of these shorts. And for those who don't know, Harpo Marx's shtick is that he never talks in the movies, so his whole thing is pantomime against the other two characters, sometimes three, sometimes four, but for the most part it's Groucho and Chico's with. But he would also do an extended harp routine, and that's exactly what he does here. But I gotta say, I love how the animator, even though that this is clearly a flower version, and it's not exactly a in-depth caricature or anything like you would have seen in some of those Hollywood celebrity parody shorts that come out later on, but here, it's quite clear that it's Harpo Marx. And if you look at the animation of the eyes and the mouth, the animator was still able to capture the essence of who Harpo Marx was. Then see a whole other bunch of flowers. I'm actually not sure what these will be called. I mean, if you're a botanist or someone who has an interest in flowers, definitely point out some of the other species that I might have missed, because I'm certainly no flower expert. But we see some flowers here who look as though they're dressed up in an old-timey, even for when the short came out, in terms of fashion, and they have their parasols and they do a dance. I know Friz Freleng in the short The Gay Anties will do something similar, where you'd have a whole bunch of ants dancing with parasols as well, so maybe this was something in the back of his mind, I don't know. But if it looks familiar, that's probably where you've seen it before. But once again, I can't help but point out the wonderful timing here and the beautiful music here, which again, Manny will go through what these musical cues are. I mean, some might say all these scenes take a little bit too long because we're already 2 minutes and 15 seconds into it and nothing of note has really happened. We just see a whole bunch of sequences to the music and that's pretty much it. But for those who are new, these Merry Melodies, there was a stipulation that a song had to be promoted. So I get the feeling that they had one idea, they did it, but they still had to promote the song, so they just did this extended bit to sort of get it out of the way, because all these introductory bits are not really referred to ever again. Now we're going to start the meat of the story, and that is the announcement of the flower pageant. And this is probably a play on the Pasadena Tournament of Roses parade. I mean, that's the only thing I could see that this could possibly be related to, because they would have all these floats, which would have all these flowers put around in these wonderful designs. It's not something I'd personally heard of beforehand, but then again, I'm not in America, but I've had a look at some of the pictures, and definitely some of those floats are really, really stunning to see. So definitely check it out if you haven't. So we see a whole bunch of flowers looking on, going, yep, I'm going to enter this competition, and keep in mind that it's open to all contestants. Now, in the next bit, we hear an announcer, and my good friend Keith Scott, who's the author of the wonderful Cartoon Voices book, is actually not sure who does that voice, so hopefully information will come to light on that. So once again, in a wonderful display of timing, we see the parade begin, and it's all timed beautifully to the music, right down to those bees on top of those turtles, doing the actual drum beat. I do have to wonder what the actual hierarchy here of these animals to flowers are. So you got the flowers being alive and the animals. Yeah, I know. I'm overthinking it. I know. But if you look at the background, I like the designs of some of these flowers and just the way the short looks. Now we see a whole bunch of floats, which look nice, and they especially pop in this restoration. But it's got them clever little bits. We got worms pulling these floats. I guess the worms are the horses of this society. I know. I'm overthinking it. I know. But, whatever. It's all in good fun. Of course, one of the floats has to be a reference to the Netherlands, because you've got the tulips in the middle and you've got flowers making a windmill. It's clever. I'll give them that. And in a gag we've never seen before, we see two of these, I'm assuming they're fireflies. They have the stop sign on their bottoms, and when the float stops, I guess they switch on. But, alright, it's cute. Now, the next bit you might be familiar with, because it's been reused in a few other shorts, especially by Frank Tashlin in his Books Coming to Life series that he would do. But we see these flowers doing some sort of like a Scottish dance, because of course they have to have them doing a Scottish dance, right? But now we're halfway through the short and we finally see our hero of the short, this little cactus or cacti. Whatever the proper term is, definitely let me know in the comments, okay? But we see that he wants to join in. So he's got this little toy train, probably the one that's left behind by a little child, I don't know, but he ends up creating his own float. You would have thought he would have created one earlier if he wanted to enter, but that's okay. Let's see how he goes. So he grows a whole bunch of sweet peas, and you see those beautiful flowers around, and he enters into the parade. But I love that shot of him looking all confident, like, yep, I'm going to win this thing. But sadly his confidence is short-lived because the judges are not too impressed. And to be fair, I think the judges have made the right call here because it's not exactly a particularly impressive float compared to what we've already seen in this short, although the judges could have been a little bit more nice about it, but in any case. So his little toy vehicle ends up exploding and he gets laughed and mocked at. This actually comes across as an origin for like a supervillain or something, yeah? Because that's usually how they start. They try and do something good, they get mocked and teased, and then they end up going up against society. So I'll give him credit. At least he becomes a hero at the end of this one instead of turning into a villain. But now we're into our third act, and we see that these red tip matches have been carelessly left around, including a magnifying glass. Why was the magnifying glass left around? You tell me, I don't know. But we got to start this fire somehow and create our actual villain of this short, this dastardly flame. Now, one interesting little coincidence I've noticed is you've got Walt Disney, his first 3-strip Technicolor short was Flowers and Trees, and that had a third act involving a fire in an actual forest. Here, we've got a short by Warner Brothers, which is the first 3-strip Technicolor short, Flowers for Madame, and it also has a fire in the third act. So it's one of those really weird coincidences. So we hear all the flowers yelling out, "Fire, fire!" Kit Scott in the Cartoon Voices book notes that Bernice Hansel appears to do some of these voices here, and you can sort of tell that's her. So I'll take his word for it for sure. So all these flowers start running away. But I love the design of the little flames that actually pop out from the big flame like that. Just looks so angry. I don't know, something about that little design there. But one of the other flowers steps up, becomes brave, and ends up scooping some water into itself, I guess, and ends up putting out the flame. But the fire still rages on, and we see this poor snail trying to get away from it. And the flame makes this snail go really fast. This is probably the funniest bit of the short, in a short that's not particularly funny. I like how the background just becomes this blurred mess of watercolors, so it's a nice little effect there. But the flames still rage on, and we see our hero again looking on and thinking, what does he need to do here? I mean, he shouldn't need to run in. He's a cacti after all, or a cactus, again, whatever you want to call it, because cacti are full of water, so there's that, I guess. But we all know these things are not scientifically accurate, and if you learn that for the first time, I apologize. But he heads over to a hose with a water spout and tries to put out the fire. He keeps the main fire at bay, but that little flame is quite persistent. He comes around and it ends up burning our hero, and looking happy about it too. So the tap is turned off, so the water's gone, and the flames continue to rage on. And yes, if you were wondering, Friz Freleng indeed reuses that same shot of the massive flame approaching. I mean, why not? It definitely works still, but it's definitely something I noticed here. We see a patch of watermelons, which are naturally filled with water, because this is, of course, a logical world where everything makes sense, right? I mean, it's got water in the name, so why not? So the cacti saves the day, and one of the little leftover flames is still running around, trying to still live, I guess. And he goes past this particular box that says Pierce's Pine and Tar, so that would be a reference to Ted Pierce, who would have joined around this time. But it says there that this soapbox is made in Laguna by the Sea, and that is a seaside resort. And I didn't know this because, again, I'm not American. And I had a look, and apparently it's famous for an annual art festival and a Pageant of the Masters production. So there you are. So we see a grasshopper that we've not seen before, and he ends up saving the day, because we certainly don't need the actual hero we've established to save the day. But anyway, we basically end right there. But one thing you'll notice when this short ends, and this is again something what I mentioned before regarding the original end cues, is that the music sounds like it just abruptly stops before they tacked on the Blue Ribbon reissue ending. So it'll be interesting to see how they would have actually originally ended this short. But regardless, I've been proudly on long enough, so my good friend Manny Cruz, the Toonie Tenor, he's going to go through all the musical references within and give his own thoughts as well. So take it away, Manny.
Hi everyone, this is Manny Cruz, the Toonie Tenor, coming at you with the latest edition of It's Time for Manny's Music Time with music trivia for you today. Bump! For the 1935 Merry Melody cartoon Flowers for Madame, directed by Isidore Fritz Freeling and musical direction by Norman Spencer. So it was nice to revisit this one after seeing it in a pretty faded print several years ago when I started watching all the Warner Brothers shorts in chronological order. I think I saw this one during like COVID around that time. And there was nothing else to do, so I was watching some cartoons, and yeah, I used to watch the old faded Turner print. And now this one is beautifully restored, and as Anthony has already mentioned, that this is nice to see it in this context of being so lovingly restored, because it is the first Warner Brothers short in 3-strip Technicolor, and it's really cool to see like how they were able to take advantage of it so soon in terms of the work that the animators and the designers and background artists and everything, how they put everything together. So let's jump into the music cues because there's not a lot to talk about. So obviously the cartoon starts off with I Think You're Ducky, the Merry Melodies theme by Gerald Marks and Charles Tobias, which I found out last time I was recording when I did the commentary for Billboard Frolics. And then it goes into the title track, Flowers for Madame.
If you chance to stop in this garden plot, all the garden wonders will unfold. In here you will see flowers that are free. Some will dance and some will play. To the music they will sway.
So Flowers for Madame was written by 3 people, by Charles Tobias, Charles Newman, and Murray Mencher. If you want to know more about Murray Mencher and Charles Tobias, please listen to the audio commentary for Billboard Frolics once again, because those two are responsible for writing the soon-to-be Merry Melodies theme song, Merrily We Roll Along, which will make its debut in 1936 for the opening. So Flowers for Madame was first recorded on Victor Records by Ray Noble and his orchestra, and it was actually recorded the day before my birthday, March 9th, but 1935, so that's 53 years before I was born. And on the vocals, it was Al Boley. You can listen to it on YouTube. I really like the recording of it. It's really pretty. Now, it's been a while since I've seen this cartoon, and it's been a while since I've heard this song. So when I was listening to it, I was like, oh, yeah, I recognize that melody. I've heard that in several other Warner Brothers shorts. I don't have a list right now, but I definitely remember hearing that in other cartoons. So it's a pretty melody, and the recording online is really nice. So if you get a chance, go listen to it.
In their colony, the flowers dance and sing in harmony. Though you have never seen them play before, you can't help adore. They're beautiful to see.
Now, a little bit about Charles Newman, and by little, I mean literally little, because it was kind of difficult to find information for him. But anywho, this comes from IMDb, and I quote, Charles Newman was born February 22nd, 1901 in Chicago, Illinois, and he died January 9th, 1978 in Los Angeles, California. He was a songwriter, obviously, and he worked on lots of different songs. He collaborated with other songwriters. There's a whole list of them that I'm not going to read right now that I found on another website. So yeah, that's all she wrote for that guy. So it's unfortunate I don't have more to talk about, but I'm trying to keep this one short and sweet.
You see the flowers as they start to bloom. They all put on their very best array, for this is the day of the flower parade.
So, moving on to the next cue. You hear is Oh You Beautiful Doll, because we've never heard that one in a Warner short before. Oh You Beautiful Doll is a ragtime song from the year 1911, and it was written by Nat D. Eyre, he wrote the music, and Seymour Brown wrote the words. And that same song, like I said, has been used in Warner Brothers cartoons, but it was also the subject of a Max Fleischer screen song. So maybe one day Anthony will do a whole series on the screen songs, the talk art tunes, or I don't know, the Popeye shorts or the Betty Boop one. So if the demand is there, folks, you better ask. And you hear Oh You Beautiful Doll in the scene where you have the caricature of Harpo Marx playing the harp. And I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. It sounded really pretty the way that it was done in that scene. So later on, as the parade is starting and all the flowers are doing their thing, you hear the Campbells are coming. The Campbells are coming. Hooray, hooray. The Campbells are coming. So on and so forth. This information I found from a website called pioneergirl.com. I'm just going to quote a little bit from it. So, The Campbells Are Come is a traditional Scottish tune or jig. The song title in Gaelic is, and I'm not going to pronounce it because I don't know how to read Gaelic. The first word looks like baile, which means dance in Spanish, but that's not what I'm talking about. But it looks like it's spelled Baile, and the second word is Inverora, and that means in the town of Inverary, the family home of the Campbell clan in Inverary Castle in Argyll, Scotland. So just a little bit of that, and from reading another site, that the song itself dates back to sometime in the 1700s. But usually in cartoons, you hear that as like the quote-unquote stereotypical Scottish tune. Like, for example, during this time, if you would see a Mexican character, you would hear like the Mexican hat dance or La Cucaracha, so on and so forth. So a little bit of a musical shorthand to represent an ethnicity or nationality in animation through music, for better or for worse. So, moving on to the next cue, you hear the song Powder My Back. That's a weird name for a song. Powder My Back by Mort Dixon and Ali Rubel, two guys that we've mentioned before. And if you want to learn more about those two characters, Mort Dixon, please check out the commentary for A Great Big Bunch of You, and for Ali Rubel, please check out the commentary for Pop Goes Your Heart. And you hear that song when the cactus decides to decorate his little cart and everything, and he starts pulling up to the parade. It's a song you hear as he's making his quote-unquote triumphant entrance into the parade, and then his cart decides to go kablooey. And last but not least, the final cue that takes up a significant chunk of the cartoon near the end is traffic, also known as being a driver in New Jersey and New York. Ha 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 ha, hilarious. But anyway, Traffic by J.S. Samishnik. This cue, I tend to notice it's been popping up a lot in the Norman Spencer / Bernard Brown era of Warner Brothers shorts, but you also do hear it relatively often in the Carl Stalling era. So Traffic, I always say that when I hear that cue, I think of Falling Hair from 1943. That's the first cartoon that pops in my mind whenever I hear this particular piece of music. And you also hear a little bit of Traffic. I know I did a commentary recently for a personal favorite short of mine from Frank Tashlin and Porky the Fireman. Appropriate traffic, fire truck, ha ha ha. So if you do want to learn more about J.S. Samishnik, please check out the commentary that I did for My Green Fedora, because that cartoon also features this cue. So yeah, I'm keeping this one short and sweet, and Anthony is saying thank God and screaming at the top of his lungs, and I don't know, maybe having a beer, Foster's, and I don't know. I'm going to try not my best to resort to a bunch of Australian stereotypes. Or what I could say is, if I do say something insulting, and I'm purposely saying this, so Anthony, you better put this in the track, but every time I make fun of Anthony, maybe he should Photoshop my face in front of, or maybe I look like in this cartoon, because I forgot how weird it looks. There's a flower in one of the scenes where some of the flowers are cheering and clapping, and there's a purple flower with like a little hint of orange. Oh, cool. Michelangelo and Donatello, my two favorite turtles. And it's the only one with like these little beady eyes, and it's just, every time I've seen this cartoon, it's like, all the other ones have like this typical 1930s era big banjo eyes, like Eddie Cantor. I did a commentary for Eddie Cantor, and these huge eyes, and then you got this little beady-eyed looking purple flower. So if I insult Anthony, then that's what I look like, the purple flower that has beady eyes, because I do have like small eyes when I smile. All right, folks, thanks for listening to this commentary. Please follow me on social media at the Toonie Tenor, TheTooneyTenor, for updates on my life as a musician and as a multifaceted geek on all things Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies and more. Thanks for listening, folks. Stay out of trouble. Don't play with matches. A good lesson in this cartoon. Eat watermelons because they're delicious and they prevent fires. Have a good night, day, whatever it may be. And that's all, folks.
Thank you, Manny. So what do I think about this one? It's your middle-of-the-road Merry Melodies. If you go into it knowing the sort of thing you're going to expect, it's fine for what it is. It's not going to be funny. I mean, a few bits maybe chuckle here and there, but if you watch it with the timing in mind and the music and the way it looks, at least it's a nice visual feast. It's just nothing too spectacular, nothing too memorable, not one that I'll revisit very often. So, it gets 6 out of 10. I can't be too harsh on this one because I've got to be mindful of when this came out. And it's only around now that Tex Avery's influence is going to start being introduced. So you'll find that even Friz Freling's shorts will now start to evolve to take on more wackier sensibilities versus him trying to see if he can outdo Disney. But that will do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.